everybody. I'm Suzanne. And today's painting, it was done over a course of 2 days, but it really was intended to be an alla prima piece. Now, I started the painting out at home. And the reason was, well, when my daughter goes out of town, I keep her dog. And it's Singer's full brother. And when you have that much poodle energy together, well, it's a lot, okay? And so I didn't want to bring them both to the studio on their first day together. And I thought, you know what? I'll just take the day off from my downtown studio and just work from home. And my friend Kathy was there to help. And so we decided to just paint at home. So the painting that I did is this one right here. And it's a little mountain stream or a babbling brook. And I intended to fully get it done, but alas, poodle energy kind of got in the way. So I did the piece, basically blocked in my composition and then left it. And I left it for several weeks. Just left it. And I came across it here at the studio because I brought all my materials back down to the studio. And I looked at it and I thought, that's really kind of a neat piece. And it was just in the very early blocking in stage. And I thought, I'm just going to knock it out. Let's finish this. Let's finish this piece. And that's what today's painting's all about. I'm not going to I could almost call it an alla prima piece because I didn't get very far and basically knocked it out on the last day here at the studio. So I'm going to call it alla prima, even though it wasn't all at once, but it was wet on wet, basically, once I kind of used my initial composition as my underpainting and then threw all the other paint on top. So sit back, watch, paint along if you want to, and I'm going to take you on this little piece here of the babbling brook.
Yes, two little brother dogs that love each other very, very much. But you get those two together and there's a lot of energy and you got to do something with all this energy. And I just couldn't take them both to the studio on their first day together because, oh my gosh, poodle energy is a lot. So we decided to stay home, my friend and I, and we put out the kiddie pool, let the dogs play outside, run, and all that good stuff. Yes, Singer wants to roll in the leaves when he's done getting wet. So here I am. I'm getting ready to start this piece, and I'm in my house. And the painting there, you see the actual finished piece that I'm getting ready to do. And I wanted to keep this very loose, super loose and easy breezy, and I just wanted to make this fun. So I'm just taking a little transparent red oxide and just suggesting my composition. I know I didn't go over what my normal palette was for this piece because I was really working off an old palette. But here I'm just popping down a little transparent color to kind of suggest where where everything's going in this piece, right? So just kind of sketching it out a little bit, and before you know it, it'll start to come together. It looks like a big hot mess when I start, but that's kind of how most of my pieces start out, a big hot mess. But you can tell by looking at the finished the finished painting, what kind of palette I was using. I did have, for the bright greens in there, I did use cadmium green, I had sap green, I had ultramarine blue. The stones and rocks in the creek, there is a lot of the purple lake was another color that was on my palette, raw umber, burnt sienna. I had ultramarine blue, I had king's blue, and you'll see a lot of pink in the water, and I actually just used my purple lake and did some tints there. So that's kind of my basic palette here. I did use raw umber as well. A little bit of ivory black, but not very much. You might be surprised there wasn't nearly as much ivory black. So I'm kind of suggesting off in the distance, I'm keeping my values sort of light back there. Unfortunately, the reproduction of this photograph that I have here makes these colors seem a lot more intense than they really are. If you actually saw this painting in my studio, the photo here looks like they're incredibly intense. There was not emerald green used for this painting, but it sure looks like it. But if you watch me painting it, I think you're going to get a more accurate idea of what the colors really were when I was putting them down. that dark value that you see right there, basically in the middle of my substrate. By the way, the substrate is a super slick gessoed masonite panel. Was achieved by basically mixing raw umber, ultramarine blue, and sap green. Okay, so it looks very black in the photo on the right, but you can kind of get a better idea of what it actually looks like by looking at the painting. So a lot of these greens are muted down using, I'm actually using quite a bit of umber into my greens. I often mix brown, some type of brown into my greens, and I'm just kind of popping it in here and there. You see that color that I just put down, that green is quite intense, but obviously does not look like the photo reference on the right. But it is phthalo green emerald, but I do tone it down. And I'm using this color is a toned down version of Purple Lake. So you can see it does have that kind of purpley cast to it. And I'm just kind of popping in and cutting in some around the plants and just creating the look that I'm going for here. And I'm using that Purple Lake quite a bit throughout this piece. And the brush I'm just using I believe that is a number 3 Eclipse Long Filbert, my favorite brush. you see the process of the painting like this, it doesn't necessarily make sense at the time, and that's kind of why I put the photo reference there on the right of what the completed piece looks like. My brain is all over the place. So at this point, I'm working underwater. I can see that the water is coming over the rocks, so I needed to work wet on wet. So I'm creating the rocks, if you will, and wanting to work the water at the same time. So you're probably wondering, why do you have all these weird pink and purple colors down? Because quite frankly, folks, that's what I see when I look at the reference. Again, I want you to look more at the painting, less at the reference on the right, because those colors are a little bit off. But I can see the creek. I can see the warm water that you can see, reflected light of the trees and the warmth that's in this top water. And you're going to see me going back and forth with a lot of it. So, where I need to add cooler colors, I'll add cooler colors, etc., just to create that shape. Of course, this is a forest, right? So the warmest colors are where maybe the sunlight is kind of breaking through some of the trees and creating that dappled light on the rocks where it's splashing around in the water, etc. You're going to see that dappled light. Feel like I'm actually getting an established shape to my painting, then I'm going to start to do some of the highlights. So I'm just taking a little bit of, I believe I'm putting right here at this point, it's kind of like a king's blue on top of the stone in the back, this big large rock that's sticking out in this creek. And I'm starting to highlight. So I will play with contrast. So if I put that really light highlight on top of that rock, I'm very likely to go ahead and put dark behind it, and I'll emphasize some more of the darks. I'm always playing off a contrast and wherever the light might be hitting things. And so obviously the light, you can see by looking at the trees that the light is kind of coming in on that left side. So I'm going to darken the trees on one side and lighten them up on the other. So this is what I'm doing here. So I'm establishing my shapes. Now I'm kind of jumping in with my light. I'm getting ready to wrap it up here at the house, and I have a very kind of loose idea or underpainting for when I go back to the studio to finish it. Now, boom, just like magic. This is several weeks later. I'm at my studio, and I came across the painting in the studio and said, this is not a bad little piece. I need to finish this. So, boom, here I am. And if you look at this palette, you might recognize this palette from one of my more recent paintings, and it's actually using the same colors from the one that I did of the landscape with the cattle in the landscape. It's the same palette. It was left over. I thought, well, this paint will work, and it did, so you can see the colors that I've got there. Same colors I started with, and it's so I do have, I think you see up in the upper right corner there is some Indian yellow. I didn't use a lot of Indian yellow in this painting, but it was what was left over from one of my other paintings. And I'm using a flat brush here. You can see I rarely use flats, but in this case it seemed to be doing the trick. Especially when I paint rocks, I like flats. So as I mentioned before, anytime I can jump in and add some contrast to a piece, I'm going to. So I'm darkening some of the colors in the back, and you can see which paints I'm going for. That was I believe, is that raw umber or is that Van Dyke brown? It looks more like Van Dyke brown, but I'm kind of popping that into the rocks, and I do have also the purple lake is down on this palette. So you can see as I move around, and that's why I kind of left the palette for you to actually watch the color mixing happening here. you can really have an appreciation of how much blue I'm mixing into my greens in the background. So you can see me grabbing some more, and I'm using a little Payne's Gray as well to darken my background. Payne's Gray, does have a very bluey cast, so it does offer a lot of coolness to it without being opaque, and it's working here. It's working here. So again, anytime I can get that contrast that I'm looking for, I'll capitalize on it. So I'm putting a little bit of detail. Again, the brush I'm using here is an Eclipse Long Filbert number 3. It's like my favorite brush. So just kind of popping that in. And I'm trying to keep this loose. Anybody who knows me knows I generally don't consider myself an impressionistic artist, although I do appreciate beautiful impressionistic work. Being that I really wanted this to be an alla prima piece initially, I'm trying to keep it loose and easy here. And I put that on I was here at the studio, and my friend was here, and she saw me making the thumbnail for this video, and I had loose and easy on it, meaning I didn't have enough room on the thumbnail to use the word impressionistic, so I just said loose and easy. And she says, "Are you sure you want to put loose and easy with your face right there on the thumbprint?" And I thought, you know what? I guess you can call that clickbait. If it makes more people come watch my videos, okay, we're loose and easy today. But really, I wanted the concept of being a little bit looser with my painting technique and not so worried and uptight about the detail. So I'm using that nice, it's kind of a very dark, cool green. It's almost a bluey green, and I'm mishing it around in the background, and I'm creating the light where I'm leaving the light background where I want it to show, and creating more contrast. So I have that lighter edge to the tree, so I can go ahead and put a darker value up next to it, and now you can kind of see the trees a little bit better. See how that works? Just playing with value, folks. Value and temperature, that's the key. Now I'm switching over to a brush. This is a little Princeton. It's really a watercolor brush if you want to know. It's a synthetic, like a Kolinsky type brush with a really super fine point. This was a gift, a freebie given to me by Scott with Jerry's Artorama out of Knoxville, Tennessee. And he's always wonderful about throwing some freebies in the bag. And I like to go ahead and give reviews when I can. And what's nice is I'm working wet on wet here. But because I have that, I have to keep loading because it will blend if you press too hard. So I can use that little tip of that brush to do the details, like suggesting branches and things in the background. And that's really the only kind of detail that's going in here. I'm suggesting sticks and branches. That's it. And using that little brush is doing the trick. So I'm going in here, getting a little bit more white that's mixed with a little purple, and I can, wherever I need to add some little highlights, this brush is doing it for me. So working on that bank in the background. And you'll see this brush will come in quite handy throughout the rest of this piece. You'll see it being used quite a bit. Now remember, folks, I am calling this alla prima simply because now at this point, all the paint that I'm working in is wet on wet. So I'm using a very soft brush. This happens to be a red dot, which is a synthetic sable. So just like the brush I was using before, this is also a very soft brush. And when you're working on a substrate that's super slick, it's kind of, you really kind of need it. So I'm adding some more dark values. I'm curious, folks, have you ever stopped on a painting and basically forgot about it and then picked the same painting back up weeks and weeks later? I'm curious if you have. Please leave it in the comments section. Let me hear about it. Because often for me, if I've lost the mojo that started me into a piece, it's hard to get it back. I don't always return to a piece that I might have started. But for some reason, this one I did. And I really did enjoy the process and I liked the outcome of the painting. So yeah, let me know if that's happened to you, if you've actually put a painting down and picked it back up and enjoyed the ride. Yeah, leave it in the comment section. I want to hear about it. And I also want to know how much time occurred between the time you started it and then when you picked it back up. I'm curious about that. Anyhow, here I am. I'm still working that little red dot. And you can see there's my, that paint is my cadmium green. I'm mixing a little bit of King's Blue in it, pulling it together, a little bit of the other, I believe that is, you know what, I think that's cobalt blue and not ultramarine. And just working that background. I want to keep it soft and keep my values light in the background. Again, remember temperature and value, very important here. And so I got to keep it cool and keep it light. And I just want to get that in there. And I'll be able to add, you'll see, I'll add some more tree branches and stuff like that in the back. But I'm just kind of keeping it soft and blendy. This is where you can have it blendy because I'm picking up a little bit brown because you know me, I do like to use a lot of browns in my greens. But just kind of working it, just working that edge there. Yeah, I'm working a little quickly here, but as you can see, it's starting to come together. It's starting to feel a lot more like a creek. So I have a lot of the warm colors where you see the water is relatively flat, since the stream basically is kind of in plains. That, I have that reflective light of the trees and the soil and the ground underneath the water moving over it. You've got that bright color. But then as you move down into to more of the turbulent water, you've got the foam, the white water, if you will, over the rocks and the splashes and the fun. So I'm actually going quite impasto with my titanium white over the foamy parts of where the water is churning up. And I can go right on top of some of these other lighter colors that are pinks and these grays and these light greens and all these fun colors. Wherever I have the more turbulent water, I can just put that titanium white on pretty darn thick. And that's what you see is happening here. Now I've got to work some of the foreground rocks, and I'm just kind of, popping down. This is just kind of a mucky, a mucky brown gray color, and basically achieved by using raw umber with a little yellow ochre and titanium white, and just cooling it down a little bit. That looks like I'm putting a little King's Blue on top and suggesting where things are wet, where the rocks might shine, but I'm keeping it, just very loose. This is a loosey-goosey kind of piece for me. I guess as impressionistic as I generally go. And you can see as I'm mixing the colors, I'm putting in some more of the colors in the bank over here, and knowing where the light's coming in. We already discussed this a little earlier. The light is basically coming in on the left side of the painting, on the upper left. So wherever the light's not hitting, it's going to be kind of cool and dark. And so this bank wouldn't be catching a lot of light. So I'm keeping everything kind of cool and dark on that bank there on the left, popping in some more areas where the rocks are. And yeah, this is all coming together. It's really pulling it in. And I'm putting some light and shine on the rocks. And it's happening. This has been a really fun piece, and I certainly hope that you've enjoyed it. Again, remember, folks, if there's any questions about anything that you've seen me do here, please leave it in the comments section. You can see that, you can basically see the palette on the other side, what I'm working with, but I told you what I started with. I just didn't have my original showing you the palette before I started, simply because I was working from home and yada yada, but here it is. And I'm putting some lighter, again, working contrast. So I'm putting that white right up against that rock so that you can see that the green mossy aspect on the front of that rock. Remember, the sun's hitting that side of the rock, right? So you can see that lighter, knowing how to make the sun hit the rock right there. It's happening. And just it's almost done, folks. And again, I hope you enjoyed today's painting. And if you did, give me a thumbs up and leave all your questions in the comment section. I'll get to you. here I am jumping in again with that little pointed round that I got from Jerry's Artorama, Scott at Jerry's. And you can see I've added more sticks and twigs and things in the background. And you can see there's trees in the background. And all of that is all, it just brings it together. And I'm able to use that same brush to do little tiny details in the water as well. So yeah, that's about as much detail as I put in this piece. Again, it's all about contrast and temperature on this. And this was so much fun. It's good to loosen up a little bit, right? And with that last stroke, folks, I believe I am finished. Yeah, again, not a ton of detail, just enough to give you that feeling. This is a nice woodsy little babbling brook. And here you see it already framed, ready, hanging on the wall, and hopefully will be hanging on someone else's wall before too long. So again, folks, if you have any questions, just leave in the comments section. I'll get to you. And I want to thank you for joining me.
See what I mean? It was really basically an alla prima piece. But, when I started the painting out, I really didn't go over the palette that I used for it because I was working off of an old palette that kind of had some paint on it. And I was just fiddling around. And honestly, folks, there's days when I just kind of jump into something and there was very little fresh paint that was squirted on, but I can tell you it was obviously a lot of greens and blues and purples and whites. I used ivory black and raw umber. That was basically my palette. And yeah, that was it. So if you have questions about anything I covered in this video, and I'm sure you will, especially about the palette, since I didn't go over it initially like I normally do in my videos, just leave me a comment in the comment section and I'll let you know what it was. But this was kind of a fun piece and a little bit of a kind of a deviation from what I normally do because I did this in a very loose impressionistic style, which is kind of not my thing, but I really did like it and it was fun. And so I hope you found this to be fun too. And if you did like today's video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. And you can ring that bell. Just hit the bell down there and you'll know when the next videos come out. So from Kingsport, Tennessee, I want to say thank you very much and I'll catch you next time. Bye.